All right, I said there were 3 sections to this lecture. There's really 4. Gotcha. This one's really short. I actually just wanted to mention a few points where I disagreed with the textbook on. Nobody cares but me. You can really just skip this lecture if you want to. One of the points I wanted to make is that the textbook argues that the first sign in the archaeological record of human beings engaging in religion or other hominins like Neanderthals would be intentional burials. So, for example, we have I think it's called the Nephtubian, a very early burial site in Africa, where individuals have sort of been intentionally placed with their knees in such a way that you can tell that they didn't just leave the corpse somewhere randomly. Or you have like Neanderthal burial sites when there appears to have been remains from flower petals left on the corpses, or another one where you have a burial of a human being done way deep, far in a cave system where it would have been really inconvenient. And the textbook says, and some archaeologists have argued, that those kind of seemingly intentional burials are signs of the first religious activity, because otherwise, before that, humans were just sort of leaving their corpses around, as the textbook rather uneloquently says it. And that this intentional burial only started as human beings started to believe that the dead had spirits and therefore had to be treated properly. I don't know if I buy that or not. I have to be really honest. I don't know if I buy that or not. Maybe that's certainly one interpretation, and I don't think it's an unreasonable interpretation, and I see how people get there. On the other hand, I think the fact that in our own societies, non-religious people continue to bury their dead, and not just because they're legally required to, or cremate, I think suggests to us that people feel that the bodies of the dead should be respected, whether or not they have a sort of a spiritual attachment to the deceased, or think that, whether or not they think the deceased continues on as a spirit. And indeed, people still do funeral services, whether or not they think there's an afterlife, because people want to honor the dead, right? Whether or not they think the dead continues as a spirit. And so, I don't know if I buy the idea that intentional burials in the archaeological record are necessarily a sign of religion and are the earliest signs of religion. I don't know if I see it. Similarly, with the point about rock and cave paintings, the textbook also suggests that that would be one of the earliest signs of human religious behavior, specifically when you find some cave paintings like the Lascaux cave paintings in France, where you have like a hoofed animal, something that looks kind of like it must be maybe a bison or what do you call them? Before we domesticated cows, an auroch that's been painted over and over and over and over again in the same area. And they say, that these might have, I appreciate that they used might language, because I don't think anybody's really sure. They say early humans might have painted and carved the walls of caves, abstract paintings such as geometric designs, the meanings of which are difficult to decipher. The common interpretation is that it has religious significance. So people oftentimes say, well, they were painting the prey animal over and over again. They must have been doing imitative magic. They must have been trying to make the hunt successful by sort of doing a magical painting of the hunt that they were about to go on. And that's why they would have painted it over and over. Yeah, that's likely. That makes sense. That's probably maybe what happened. On the other hand, I mean, who's not been in a boring class like maybe this one and been doodling on their paper, doing random geometric designs? You might literally be doing that right now. I'm not convinced that that necessarily means religious art. So I don't know. I don't think we will ever know through archaeology, or at least I don't think we know at the present moment exactly when and where and how religion started for human beings. I don't know whether or not that's something archaeology can answer for us. I think it's something we should continue to do research in and try to unravel the roots of religiosity, but I don't know that we can ever find it out. And, as one famous anthropologist points out, Emil Durkheim, we might be better off, instead of trying to interpret backwards and figure out how it started, maybe a more interesting question might be, how does it always start? Meaning, or as he puts it, the omnipresent causes. Why is it not just that it started at one point in human history, but that it started, so to speak, in every human society? At some point, every human society has developed a religion. Why would that be the case? So, did it spread from one place? Or, as Durkheim suggests, is it perhaps that there are things about the human condition where it inevitably arises within every social group? Or perhaps a mix of both. The book suggests that exactly as I did, so you're going to think it's weird that I'm disagreeing with the book. I'm not really disagreeing with it, I just don't love the way they worded it. The idea that religion has an intellectual function, that our big brains compel us to seek understanding and knowledge. And I would agree with that. So I'm not really disagreeing with the book. I'm disagreeing with sometimes the way people take those kinds of statements and assume that that would be the start of religious behavior. It was a lot of early anthropologists interpreted that way as like, oh, religion happened because humans were wondering where the weather came from, or they were wondering what happened to their souls when they were dreaming. I don't know that we can know that that's how it originated in many groups, and I also think we have to be kind of thoughtful about that because it's not necessarily normal human behavior to kind of attribute supernatural causes to everything that doesn't make sense to us. When kids start dreaming, they don't necessarily assume that those dreams are visions of something. It's just a weird dream that they had, and so that's kind of, and there's a lot of times where we have unexplained things and we're just like, we don't know why it works that way. And, sometimes we seek a religious explanation like Zonde witchcraft, but other times we just kind of leave it as an unexplained variable. Like, I don't know. I don't really get why seasons work the way they do. I mean, I do. It's been explained to me a number of times since grade school. I get it. But it's still, there's parts of sort of the Earth's tilt that are like strange to me. But, I don't like then throw it up to, well, it must be the spirits or something. The book also said, religion serves an emotional function by helping humans cope emotionally with anxiety-producing events that we can't control, like accidents, illness, and death. I would very much agree with that, and I think we have a lot of good research on how religion relates to people's anxieties. At the same time, we want to be kind of careful about correlation versus causation. So when I teach my anthropology of religion class, sometimes people will make statements to the effect of, oh, religion exists because people are afraid of death. I've never found that to be a terribly convincing argument, at least in part because not all religions make as big of a deal about an afterlife as others. I think most religions have some version of an afterlife. I would say some don't, and I would say in some do. There's quite a number of whom do, but it's not really a main focus. The religion is much more focused on sort of immediate, tangible physical needs or mystical needs. And so, I think yes and no. I think we want to be careful when we say that something has a function to distinguish between why something exists versus just something that, now that it exists, something that people do with it, right? Now that religion, I'm not sure we know where religion came from in human history, at least not from an anthropological perspective. So when we say things like, well, religion does this or does that for societies, that doesn't necessarily mean that's why it exists. It's just an observation that this is one of the things that it does. In the same way that my hand can be used to play a PlayStation controller, but the human hand did not evolve so that I could play PlayStation, right? Okay, well, that's it for this week. I hope I successfully made the point that religion is an important and interesting field to study and an important part of understanding who we are as human beings. And indeed, I think whether or not we are ourselves religious or spiritually oriented, religions have huge effects on cultures the world over. It's part of being a culturally literate person, because religion is important to so many people. And it's also important for understanding ourselves, because again, whether or not we are religious, as that silly knock on wood example shows us, or that silly Quebecois profanity example shows us, oftentimes it influences us in ways that we don't see as we strive to be human. Okay, thanks.